Good afternoon, Dr. Gilli. Thank you a lot for participating in this year's event. Andrea Gilli is a senior researcher in military affairs at the NATO Defense College in Rome and affiliate of the Center for International Security and Cooperation of Stanford University. Andrea Gilli is among the handful of Europe-based security study scholars whose publications are and have been assigned for classes in the most prestigious university in the world, such as Harvard, Stanford, Columbia, and University of Berkeley, and so on. And today's topic is preparing for Nato-Mation, the Atlantic Alliance toward the age of artificial intelligence. Please, thank you.
Well, thank you for inviting me. It's a great pleasure. That's my third edition, I think, now with the Festival of Diplomacy, but it's the first time that I'm invited to speak about what exactly I do research on. It is technological innovation, international security, and basically also artificial intelligence. What we are speaking about is basically a paper that I wrote for the NATO Defense College, where I currently work, and is part of a broader research agenda I'm conducting. What I argue basically in this paper is that, as many of you may know, the world is changing, and artificial intelligence is one of the core sources of change we're observing around the world. And artificial intelligence does not come out of the blue. It's a product of three main forces at hand. That is, first of all, the exponential growth in the power of processors, which is basically the Moore's law, what some of you may be familiar with. One of the founders of Intel, who in 1965 predicted the increase in the computing power of processors. The second main force, the main source of change, is the increasing capabilities of software. There's an interesting article written on the Wall Street Journal of August 2011 from Mark Andreessen, who is the founder of one of the most important venture capital firms of the Silicon Valley. The title of that article is Software is Eating the World. What Mark Andreessen predicted back then was that software was going to play a growing role basically in every industry, in every aspect of the world. And in fact, only 1 year later, there was a major revolution in deep neural networks and basically machine learning, which is what we are observing right now. The third main change has to do with the digitalization of information. As processors became cheaper and more effective because of the first source of change, we put sensors all around in our smartphones, in our phones, in our laptops. So this increasing digitalization has dramatically pushed the growth of digital data. So as a result, nowadays, we basically have the amount of digital data is doubling every 24 months. And every 2 years, more or less, we have the entire, we have more knowledge created than in all human history beforehand. Where is this leading? Well, this is leading to a different future in which this applies to the economic system. Google, Facebook, Amazon are widely and massively using big data and machine learning, but also applies to the world of defense. And some analysts are concerned, some other people are less concerned, because the adoption of artificial intelligence in the military domain has several potential benefits, but also poses some risks as well as some challenges. So let me just discuss briefly some of the key aspects which warrant attention. So first of all, one of the main concerns is that with artificial intelligence, with these dual-use technology, so technology which is available in the commercial market, several countries or actors, including terrorist groups, could actually exploit these new capabilities to basically reshape the global security environment. So this is a real the concern. This is a real threat. However, I'm slightly skeptical of the most pessimistic readings for a simple reason, because anybody of us can have access to something that is deadly. However, it's something different to employ a new technology to dramatically reshape the international system, or even just war battles, or even wars. Let me give you an example. The claim that dual-use technologies are widely available is correct, but if we look, the leading companies in the world when it comes to software, for instance, are very few. The software market is very concentrated. It's Google, Amazon, Apple, Facebook, Baidu, and so forth. What does it say? It says that developing advanced software is very, very difficult. So the idea that a small kid in a garage or a small terrorist group can basically match the capabilities of these these companies or even countries is at this stage a bit premature. There is a second concern. Some are worried that basically if we automate our defense systems, there is a risk of inadvertent escalation or war. Basically, these automated systems will launch a war without the humans are fully in control, and obviously this puts this creates some risks. Also, in this case, this is obviously possible. I believe, however, at this stage is relatively unlikely. Why is unlikely? Because machine learning depends on data. Depends on data, it means that an algorithm requires to scan the horizon and basically work on the basis of the data it receives. However, data, as some say, may be the new oil, but exactly like oil, it needs to be refined. Data can be used only if they are clean, if they are processed, if they are put in the right data pipeline infrastructure. So what does it mean in simple terms? That if I fully integrate artificial intelligence in my armed forces, and the adversary is totally aware of this and knows also that I will need a lot of data because that's how artificial intelligence works, it can just feed into my systems biased or manipulated data. As a result, it can basically make my weapon systems do what he believes they should do, including eventually strike my own forces and not his forces. So until this challenge is not addressed, I believe that most countries, most armed forces will be very, very quiet and cautious about fully integrating autonomous systems in their armed forces. Doesn't mean they won't, it just means that the task for which they will be employed will be more limited. There's a third aspect that I believe deserves attention, and is the logic of complementation. When we think about warfare and robots, the general idea is of substitution. So robots are going to enter the battlefield, and as a result, countries eventually may have less concerns about waging war because they won't pay a political cost for these initiative. Well, that's the logic again on theory is correct, but a part is missing. The part that is missing is that if we look at technological change in a historical perspective, what we see is that it's true that the number of workers, for instance, in the industry have shrunk, but the skills that workers require to work in advanced manufacturing plants have increased. As a result, nowadays, all the leading industrial companies employ a higher share of highly skilled individuals. When we apply this simple reasoning to the world of defense, we see a similar effect. An Air Force pilot in the 1930s needed just a few months of practice and training to be able to fly. Nowadays, an Air Force pilot requires 7 years of training to be able to fly. You can compare the number of pages of a manual for a jet fighter 100 years ago. Military aircraft were a few hundred pages. Now we move to thousands and thousands of pages. What does it mean? Well, it means that as technology becomes more complex, it's true that it requires less human beings, and this is the complementation effect I was talking about, but it requires more skilled human beings. And there is just going to be a competition for talent. So the countries which have access to the more skilled human capital, the more qualified personnel, are just going to find themselves in a position of advantage. I'm reaching the end of my time, I think, soon. So let me just conclude with a couple of considerations about NATO. What does it mean? Well, technological change is something that is happening and is independent of countries, NATO, and in a way the world, because it's a product inspired by people, but to which most people have little influence. These technological change can be, however, if not dominated, can be handled by just looking with ahead at the challenges it's going to create and preparing for the transition and the transformation it requires. I was talking about personnel. So NATO countries, definitely one thing they should do is making sure that they will have the right amount of skilled personnel in the armed forces, but also in the industry, because we'll need more data scientists, for instance. At the same time, to exploit big data in the civilian economy, but also in warfare, we need data pipeline infrastructures, which means a complex IT system which gather, processes, stores all the data, which can then be employed. Doing all these is not easy at all. We see in the commercial world where companies are taking years and even longer to exploit and employ artificial intelligence, and the same challenges will apply to the world of defense. So I stop here. I was given 10 minutes, and I think I'm right into the 10 minutes, so I'm happy now to try to answer your questions.
Thanks a lot. Thank you. I'll be addressing questions that some students have asked. The first one is, what is the level of primacy of the Nato-Mation process in the NATO agenda? Do you think that by underestimating the development of these technologies, the Atlantic Alliance may lose its military superiority?
Okay, that's an interesting question, because so my current paper, it's called Nato-Mation 2. So I'm writing some suggestions for NATO artificial intelligence strategy. What I can say in public is that within NATO, although the key leaders, all the key agencies, or the key units are very aware of those changes, of those transformations, and are acting swiftly in order to make sure that the alliance is not going to lag behind. The question is spot on, because the changes we're observing requires prompt answers. It doesn't mean that if we wait 1 second, we are doomed to fail, but this means that it's important to start thinking about what needs to be done and when, in order to be prepared for a change that we can handle and we can control.
Thanks a lot. I'll be asking the second question, and that's going to be it. As far as the impact of emerging technologies in the military field, you support the idea that it will take time before countries can exploit the technologies of the fourth industrial revolution for building military power. Do you think that the rise of these technologies will change our conception of war, meaning that that's not intended anymore as a conflict between two armies fought on the battlefield, but much more subtle art based on breaches of cybersecurity systems, management of data to manipulate people, and so on?
That's a very good question. It's a complex question, and there are probably two levels of answers to be provided. The first is that obviously, as weapon systems become faster, more powerful, more capable, the incentive to fight using those systems in a way shrinks. There is possible for many actors, including countries, may be more convenient to just try to move on other fields in order to win the war. Let's keep in mind that war is a political phenomenon. So we wage war, or countries wage war for achieving political goals. So it's possible that disinformation is a case in point. You may, or a country may just achieve the same goals through a disinformation campaign rather than by trying to attack an adversary, a competitor, a neighbor, or another. So in the one end, we have a potential shift in the domains where wars are fought, and the disinformation era is definitely one. But there is also, and this is in a way we can think of it as horizontally, but there is also more vertically that just some parts of traditional war or warfare, the way it's waged, it may become more digitalized, and that's also something that can happen. So countries will fight each other, but maybe more like launching cyber attacks. At the end, I was talking before about manipulating data of an adversary. That's exactly an example of a cyber attack. And there are different ways. Obviously, the more we depend on data, the more we depend on algorithms, the more those data and algorithms may be targeted. Another aspect which relates to the third force I described, these processors. What we know is that some companies put backdoors on their processors in order to have data directly shared to the home country of those microchips producers. So that's another dimension of the way warfare is going to change in the years ahead.
Thank you very much. I think that will be it for today. Thanks a lot for the intervention.
Thank you. Thanks to you.